I was standing on a ladder in the middle of the night, just finishing up my work, when a loud voice pierced the silence. A second later, I was pressed against a cold wall, and fear and something forbidden and exciting mixed inside me. I thought he was going to arrest me, but neither he nor I knew that we would both receive a sentence. Not to prison, but to a love that would change everything. I was balanced on the top of a ladder at 2:14 a.m., spray can in one hand, adrenaline in my chest, when his voice sliced through the silence like a switchblade. "Step down, hands where I can see them." The sound hit harder than any siren. I froze. The can hissed one last time before I killed it mid-spray. I didn't turn. I didn't breathe. The air suddenly felt heavier, like the whole city was holding its breath with me. From behind, I heard the crunch of boots on gravel. He didn't shout. His voice was too calm for that. Just steady, confident, authoritative. The kind of voice that made it clear there was no option but obedience. And I hated that it worked. I set the can down on the platform and slowly climbed down, each rung a tiny betrayal of the freedom I clung to. When I hit the pavement, the night swallowed me again, except for the glare of his cruiser's headlights. They didn't flash red and blue, just stayed white, piercing and sterile, like the hallway of a hospital you don't want to be in. "Turn around, hands on the wall." I did. The wall I'd been painting for hours was suddenly a cage. I felt his approach more than heard it. His presence radiated heat and weight, like a storm pressing against your skin right before it breaks. "I can explain," I started, but he cut me off. "You'll get your chance. For now, stay still." A second later, his hand was on my back, firm, pushing me against the wall. Another hand moved to my side, beginning the routine pat-down. I'd never been arrested, but I'd seen it enough. On friends, on strangers, once on my brother. I thought I knew how it would feel. I didn't. It wasn't the contact that startled me. It was the intent behind it. Controlled, professional, but close enough to shake something loose in my chest. When his hip brushed mine, something sharp and heavy pressed into my leg, his sidearm. I went cold, not because I feared he'd use it, but because I'd never been more aware of the power imbalance between us. That weight on my thigh said everything. He was the authority, I was the suspect. And yet, for a flash of a second, it wasn't just fear racing through me. Something else stirred. Something inconvenient and electric. The pat-down ended. He stepped back. "You can turn around," he said, quieter now. I did, and finally I saw him. He was younger than I expected. Tall, controlled, eyes alert but tired. His expression was unreadable, like he'd learned not to let anything through. A man with a job, a uniform, and suddenly a complication I hadn't seen coming. "You said you could explain?" he asked. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were slick with nervous sweat as I found the email. "My name's Lucas. I'm a muralist. I got permission from the building owner, but the city's dragging their feet on the official permit. He wanted me to start before they finish processing." I held out the phone. He didn't rush to take it. When he did, his fingers brushed mine, just barely, but I felt it like static. He read the screen, scrolled slowly. No expression. After a long silence, he handed it back. "This is still trespassing." "I know," I said, sharper than I intended, "but it's an abandoned textile factory. No one's used this wall in 30 years. I'm trying to make something out of nothing. You really think that's a threat?" His eyes flicked to the wall. He looked at it properly now. Really looked. The mural wasn't finished, just a sweeping nebula of blues and violets, with the beginnings of a galaxy pulling itself into form. He stared at it for so long I began to wonder if he'd forgotten me. "It's good," he said finally. I blinked. "What?" "The painting. It's good." The compliment hit me harder than his hand had. I wasn't expecting it. Not from him. Not tonight. "Look," he continued, "my report's going to say I responded to a call, ID'd the person, confirmed the owner gave verbal approval, and noted that no damage was being done. But you pack it up for the night. Come back when the paperwork clears." He could have cuffed me, towed my gear, called it vandalism and made it stick. Instead, he gave me a pass. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." He nodded once and walked back to his car. I watched the cruiser roll away until it disappeared down the street, and I stood there, alone, under the buzzing street lamp, heart still pounding, but not from fear anymore. I told myself it was just the adrenaline, just relief. But that wasn't true. It was the look in his eyes when he said my work was good. It was the weight of him still pressed into my memory. And it was the name I hadn't learned yet, one I would come to repeat too many times in the quiet of my apartment. The officer who stopped me, then didn't. I went home, but sleep never came. Not because of what could have happened, but because of what almost did. 3 days passed before I saw him again. 3 long, restless nights where I stared at my ceiling, replaying the moment his hand pressed me against the wall, the sound of his voice, the unexpected softness in his eyes when he said the mural was good. I told myself I wasn't thinking about him, just about what happened, the adrenaline, the violation, the confusion. But when the city finally emailed me the permit, I didn't celebrate. I checked my phone, half expecting a text from an unknown number that didn't exist. I returned to the wall like a man possessed, determined to bury the memory in paint and motion. The sun was still out when I arrived, and I worked nonstop until the colors on the bricks started glowing in the evening light. My hands moved fast, blending silver and indigo until they melted into a night sky that didn't need permission to exist. That's when I felt it again, a presence. I turned, already knowing who it was before I saw him. He leaned against the passenger door of his cruiser, arms crossed, sunglasses catching the last bit of light. The uniform was still there, but it didn't feel like armor anymore. It just felt like context. "Looks like your paperwork came through," he said. "You checking up on me, officer?" I tried to keep my voice even, playful, but something in my chest jolted. "Just part of my route," he said. Then with the faintest smile, "Ben." I blinked. The shift was subtle, but it changed everything. "Lucas," I said, like we hadn't already exchanged names. He walked over, slow and calm, scanning the wall again. "You added a lot." "I work fast when no one's threatening to arrest me." He didn't bite, just kept looking. "How do you blend like that?" he asked, pointing toward the sweep of colors. I blinked. I wasn't used to real questions. Most people glanced and said cool or what's it supposed to be? But he was focused, curious. I explained. Pressure variation, cap control, layering techniques. He listened like it mattered. And then, as naturally as breathing, we started talking. About the neighborhood. About the empty streets at night. About the jobs that kept us awake while the rest of the city slept. "It gets lonely," he said, not quite looking at me. "Sometimes." I nodded. "Yeah, it does." Silence settled between us. Not awkward, just real. Like we both understood something the other didn't need to say. He broke it. "I get off in an hour. You want to grab a coffee? My treat." As an apology for the whole, you know. My mouth went dry. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't asking as a cop doing PR. He was asking as a man who remembered something too clearly and didn't know what to do with it. "Yeah," I said. "Sure." The cafe was neutral ground. No uniforms, no paint-stained walls. Just 2 guys with hot drinks and uncertain eyes. He wore plain clothes. The absence of his badge made him look like someone I could imagine standing next to in line, not pushing me into brick and demanding my ID. We fumbled through small talk. Coffee, the weather, the bitter state of New York bagels. Then he said it. "This is weird, right?" I laughed. "Like a date between enemies in a bad high school movie?" "Exactly." He smiled, not a smirk, just honest amusement. "And for the record," I added, "my friends would be furious." He tilted his head. "Because I'm a cop? Because of what that uniform has meant to them. To me. It's not about you, Ben. It's about the system you walk into every day." He didn't flinch, just stared into his cup. "I know. I see it from the other side too." He looked up. There was no defense in his face, just fatigue, truth. "My older brother was killed during a mugging. Wrong place, wrong time. I joined to stop that from happening to someone else. But most days I just show up after the worst already happened. Cleanup crew for people's trauma." I didn't know what to say. I'd been ready to argue, to challenge. But this wasn't a man on the other side of a line. This was someone standing in the wreckage with me, trying to make sense of the ruins. I don't want to be seen as just a badge, he continued. That's not all I am. And I'm not just a guy with a spray can. Exactly. Something shifted then, not resolved, but acknowledged. We talked for hours about his brother, my dad, who never understood why I'd waste my talent on walls, our exes, mistakes, fears, movies, cilantro. When we finally walked out, the sky had turned purple and gold. He walked me to my car. The silence was back, but this time it pulsed with meaning. I had a good time, he said. Me too. He hesitated. Can I? He didn't finish the question, but he didn't have to. I didn't move, just watched as he stepped closer. He didn't kiss me. He didn't have to. The closeness said enough. And that night, I didn't sleep because I was scared. I didn't sleep because I knew this wasn't going to be simple. It was already too real for that. For a while, it was enough. Late night visits, long talks, quiet smiles shared over coffee and paint fumes. He started coming by the mural regularly, never in uniform after the first week, always lingering just a little longer than necessary. He'd bring coffee in that same silver thermos, leaning against my car while I painted. Sometimes he'd ask about the process. Other times he'd just watch in silence, like the act of creation was something sacred. Those were the moments I forgot he was a cop. He was just Ben. But the world doesn't let you forget for long. The first test came from my side. Maya invited me to a backyard barbecue, her version of reclaiming queer joy in a world that tried to crush it daily. I asked if I could bring someone. She raised a brow, surprised. I'd never asked before. When we arrived, I felt the tension ripple through the yard before anyone spoke. A few people glanced at him, then at me. Some nodded politely. Others didn't bother to hide the suspicion. Maya cornered me by the grill. "Lucas," she whispered, "are you serious?" "Yeah. He's a cop. He's Ben. That doesn't change the fact that—" "I know," I cut her off. "I know what he represents. But he's not what you think. Just talk to him. Please." To her credit, she did. I watched them from a distance, a strange dance of guarded words and polite questions. Later, as we were leaving, she gave me a look I hadn't expected. "He told me a joke about 3 kinds of wood stain," she said, shaking her head. "He's weird. He's oddly charming. Be careful." That was the thing. I was already past careful. The real test came from his world. Ben hadn't told anyone at the precinct about us. At first, I didn't care. I understood the risk. But the longer we stayed hidden, the more it gnawed at me. I started to notice the things he didn't say, the texts he answered in another room, the way his voice shifted when his phone rang. One night I asked, trying to sound casual, "Have you told anyone about me?" He looked away. "Not yet." "Why?" "You know why." "No," I said. "I don't." He exhaled hard. "Because I don't want to be the topic of locker room jokes. Because some guys I work with aren't safe. And because if something happens out there, and someone uses this, us, as leverage, it could get bad. For both of us." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He wasn't hiding me because he was ashamed. He was hiding me because the world we lived in still made that feel necessary. I tried to let it go, until I saw him with her. It was late. I'd finished a new piece on the west wall, something abstract, pulsing with red and black. I was packing up when I saw him across the street, standing with a woman in a tight, dark blazer. She laughed at something he said. He smiled, and I shattered. I didn't wait, didn't think. I walked straight across, adrenaline fueling every step. "Hey," I said, sharper than I meant. Ben blinked. "Lucas." The woman looked between us, eyes narrowing slightly. "I didn't know we were keeping things that professional now," I added. "Glad to know where I rank." "Don't do this," he said quietly. The woman raised a brow, clearly picking up the tension. She gave Ben a short nod and stepped away. "What was that?" I hissed. "She's with internal," he said, "following up on a case." "And you couldn't text? Call? Anything?" "It was last minute." "So am I just an afterthought now?" His jaw tightened. "You're not. But this is my job, Lucas. It's complicated." "No," I snapped. "This is simple. Either I'm a part of your life or I'm a secret. That silence, the one I used to love, returned. But this time it choked me. I need time, he said. Then take it, I replied. Alone. I turned and walked away before I could second guess it. 3 days passed. No calls, no messages. The wall sat untouched, the paint drying without me. On the fourth night, I got home to find my buzzer ringing just past midnight. I hesitated. Then I pressed the button. Ben stood there, still in uniform. His shoulders were slumped, his face drawn. A small cut ran along his cheek. His eyes, usually steady, were wrecked. Without a word, he stepped inside. I shouldn't be here, he said, but I didn't know where else to go. What happened? Domestic call, kid got caught in the middle. He was 6, couldn't stop crying. His voice cracked. I tried to keep him safe, tried to get him out, but it wasn't enough. I saw it in his eyes. The fear, like mine used to be. I moved without thinking, wrapped my arms around him and felt him collapse into me. He held on like I was the only thing left that made sense. And maybe I was. We stayed like that on the couch for hours. He didn't talk. I didn't push. When he finally fell asleep against me, I looked over at his uniform draped on the chair. The belt sat beside it, the holstered weapon. The same one that had pressed against me the night we met. Back then, it had felt like a threat. Now it looked like a burden. A tool that belonged to a man trying to do good in a world that didn't always let him. And for the first time, I realized I didn't love him in spite of his job. I loved him because of who he was underneath it. But loving him wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be safe. Not yet. Ben didn't leave that night. He stayed curled against me until the morning light crept in. Neither of us talked much. There was nothing left to say. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy with everything we'd been holding back. When he finally stood, he looked at his badge lying on my counter. I don't know if I can keep doing this, he said. Being a cop? He shook his head. Being two people, the one in the uniform, and the one who gets to be here with you. I didn't answer, because I knew what that kind of fracture felt like. Being split between who you are and who the world lets you be. Later that week, I returned to the mural alone. The sky was gray, the colors on the wall dull without sunlight. But I didn't care. I needed to finish it. Not for the city, not for the building owner. For us. For me. Hours passed in quiet concentration until I heard footsteps behind me. You missed a spot. I turned. Ben stood there out of uniform. No badge. No belt. Just a man with tired eyes and something raw in his expression. Thought you needed time, I said, keeping my voice even. I did, he replied, and I used it. He stepped closer. I told them. Told who? My captain. A few people I trust. Nothing dramatic. Just truth. I didn't breathe. And, I finally asked. Some didn't say anything. A couple made jokes. One guy said I was the bravest person in the room. Not for who I'm with, but for being honest. Something cracked open in my chest. You didn't have to do that. I did, he said. Not just for you, for me. I'm tired of hiding the best part of my life. The best part of my life. He said it like it was fact. I stepped back and motioned to the wall. Then help me finish this. He hesitated, then took the can I handed him. The angle was awkward, the lines uneven, but it didn't matter. We painted together until dusk, side by side, our hands occasionally brushing. For the first time, we weren't playing roles. We were just building something. Not just the mural, but a space neither of us had been allowed to occupy before. When the piece was finished, I stepped back and looked at it fully. The final section showed two human silhouettes facing a starry horizon. Between them, a single line of color linked their hands. Subtle but undeniable. The connection was there for anyone who looked close enough, and they would look, because within 2 days the mural went viral. Someone from the neighborhood posted a photo online. The image caught fire, not just because of the art, but because of what it stood for. A queer artist and a police officer. Two people on opposite sides of the social fault line, choosing connection over fear. We weren't naive. Not everyone celebrated. Some of my friends were wary. How can you trust him? They asked. He earns it every day, I said. Some of his colleagues kept their distance, but Ben didn't flinch. He didn't minimize me. He didn't erase us. One weekend, we walked the full length of the mural while families took pictures in front of it. A kid pointed to the silhouettes and said, "That one looks like my dad, and that one looks like my uncle." I caught Ben smiling. "You see that?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "They don't see fear. They just see people." The wall I'd painted, the one that once symbolized separation and suspicion, had become something else entirely. A meeting point, a conversation starter, a space of visibility. Ben and I never promised each other forever. That's not the kind of world we live in. But we promised to keep choosing each other. One day, one risk, one truth at a time. And for now, that was enough. Some stories start with conflict, fear, even the sound of a command in the dark. But if you're brave enough to keep listening, and someone is brave enough to tell the truth, you can build something new. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Like paint on a wall no one thought was worth saving. A month after the mural went viral, I was invited to speak at a local arts panel about public spaces and community healing. I almost didn't go. Public speaking wasn't my thing. I preferred letting walls talk for me. But Ben nudged me. "They're asking for your voice, not just your art." So I went. I stood in front of a packed room, palms sweating, and talked about color, permission, resistance, and what it meant to reclaim something that didn't start off as yours. I didn't mention Ben by name, but when I described the night I was stopped, how something that felt like a threat became the start of a connection, I knew he was in the back of the room listening. Afterward, people approached. Some praised the work. Some thanked me for telling the truth. One woman pulled me aside and said, "My son's gay. He's 14. I showed him your story. It helped." That was when I understood something I hadn't until that moment. This wasn't just about a mural, or a cop, or a kiss in the dark. It was about what it meant to be seen, and what it meant to see others, even the ones you thought you couldn't. Ben's world didn't magically become safe for us overnight. There were still awkward silences at his precinct, still a few side eyes when I picked him up after his shift. But more often now, people nodded, said hey, asked how the wall was holding up. At first, he didn't respond, just offered tight smiles. But over time, something shifted. One night, an older officer came up and asked, "So when's your artist boyfriend going to paint something at the station?" Ben's laugh was short but real. "My boyfriend," he repeated later in the car, as if trying the words on for size. "I never thought I'd get to say that out loud at work." "You did more than say it," I said. "You owned it." Still, not everyone clapped. One afternoon, while we were walking through the local farmer's market, a man spit near our feet and muttered something ugly. Ben instinctively stepped between us, his back to the guy, shoulders squared. I grabbed his hand. "Don't." He looked at me, then nodded once. We walked away. Later, in the quiet of my apartment, he asked, "How do you do that?" "Let it slide." "I don't," I said. "I just save the fight for what matters." We weren't perfect. We argued. About time, about boundaries, about the weight of things unsaid. Sometimes he'd shut down after a long shift. Sometimes I'd spiral after a bad day at the wall. But the difference now was this. We didn't run. He stayed. I stayed. We worked through it, not around it. And we kept showing up. For each other. For the spaces that didn't welcome us before. For the people who still didn't understand. When the city approached me about painting a second mural, this time near the youth center, they asked if I'd collaborate with local teens. I said yes on the spot. What I didn't expect was for Ben to volunteer to help supervise. "I want them to see that not all of us are the enemy," he said, "and I want to listen." So we did. For 2 weeks, we worked with a group of 12 kids. Some quiet, some skeptical, some openly hostile toward authority. Ben never once put on the cop act. He asked questions, learned names, got paint on his hands, and slowly, walls that had nothing to do with bricks started coming down. On the final day, one of the boys handed him a small sketch. Rough, unshaded, but sincere. It showed 2 figures standing in front of a wall of stars. One held a badge, the other held a spray can. Ben stared at it for a long time. He didn't say much, just folded it carefully and slid it into his back pocket. Later that night, sitting beside me on my rooftop, he said, "I thought I knew who I was, and then I met you." I leaned into him. "And now? Now I'm someone worth knowing." We didn't need a perfect ending. There was no parade, no article tying it all together. Just mornings where I found his thermos sitting on my counter because he'd stopped by before his shift. Just nights where I left him voice notes about paint choices because I knew he'd listen on patrol. Just two lives that had found a way to run side by side. Different, but not in conflict. And that was more than I ever expected. Final reflection. What changed? I used to believe I only belonged to the quiet, that art was my rebellion, that the badge was always the threat. But then I met a man who didn't fit the story I'd written. He didn't fix me. I didn't save him. But we helped each other become something braver. Not because it was easy, because it mattered.